Mr. Akologo, do you think the president was spot on when he said, look, there are just no signs at all that this country might be heading for disintegration?
Certainly. It depends on the perspective you want to look at it. Basically, I would say that the president was spot on. Spot on in the sense that when you're talking about disintegration of a country, you're talking about a state of anarchy. Just like exactly what we are experiencing in the Middle, when I say Middle East, more like Middle East in Africa, more like it now because they're mostly the Arab nations, African Arabic nations, what is happening in Tunisia, what is happening in Egypt, what we're now seeing in Libya, and what is about to happen in Syria. That is a state of anarchy. Nigeria is such a blessed country. After we went to the civil war from 1967 to 1970, and Gowon declared the no victor, no vanquished theme as a way of reintegrating the other part of the country, which is the Easterners, who were basically the proponents of trying to carve out a country of their own, Biafra. It's followed that we have transcended from that time up to this time with series of crises. The Maitesine riots, if you remember the Maitesine riots.
Sure.
And you remember not too long ago, the very terrible riots we also had in Kano before we came on to the issues of the bombings now. We've gone through a whole period of crisis and we have not disintegrated. 2015 that you're talking of is what Negroponte, the former ambassador of America in Iraq, talked about, because he was the director of intelligence and he was sort of predicting based on the agitations that were happening in the Niger Delta. It was basically based on those agitations. He didn't foresee Boko Haram or any of the situations we are having now. What he was foreseeing then was the kidnappings, the bombing of the platforms, oil platforms, which are basically done to draw attention, was going to get to an extent that most of those militants would cut themselves off from Nigeria. And eventually it will snowball into the other areas, like in the west and in the northern part of Nigeria. But we have since seen that the situation in the Niger Delta has been contained. Starting from Yaradua, who offered the amnesty, up to President Jonathan, who is consolidating on it. To the extent that when last did you hear of kidnapping in the Niger Delta? We must be very honest. When last did you hear of any oil installation being blown up? We are producing oil at our minimum, at our maximum output. That is OPEC quota of 2.3 million barrels. So these are all the signs do not show me like we're ready to disintegrate.
But some people, because let me come back to you now, Mr. Eke. Some people would say, well, for instance, one of the reasons some people have, expressed that fear that we might be heading for disintegration is that it would appear the way things are now, the government does not have the monopoly of coercion anymore. You have groups, springing up for instance, the Boko Haram group, that when you have a situation where the government does not have the monopoly of coercion, the forces of coercion, that then you could as well see that something is wrong. And then some people have said, well, just imagine a situation if what we're seeing now, the activities of Boko Haram in the north, if it spills over to the west of the country and the east of the country as well, that would be too much trouble. It would be difficult for the government to deal with that kind of situation because you begin to have reprisals, everywhere, here and there, and that could be potentially explosive.
It's important we make a distinction between disintegration and the state of anarchy. Disintegration suggests, like my colleague did say, a situation where groups probably seeking for self-determination
and there are quite a number of them in this country.
Okay, seeking for self-determination or trying to see if they can renegotiate the union, as it were, on a table or in a confab, as it were. That would be disintegration. But we're talking about anarchy. Anarchy has no geographical boundary. What we are experiencing now is a state of anomie, as it were, or leading to a state of anomie. And what does it take? A government has to stand up to its responsibilities. A government, you cannot equate what we're experiencing now to disintegration. Disintegration, like I did mention, is a situation where groups are saying, let us go our way.
And that's what I'm saying, that there are quite a number of groups.
That is not what is going on now. We have the Boko Haram in the north, and I don't think that they are saying, look, the northeast is going their own way. Well, my colleague did mention the civil war that took place between 1967 and 1970. That was a very clear case of we want to go our own way, and the Biafrans did not go their way. President Jonathan himself gave an example of Adakaboro, and that did not happen. That's why I'm making this distinction between a state of anarchy or anomie and disintegration. They are different. What we should rise up to now is the challenge of security. Pockets of, like you mentioned, so much small arms, proliferation of all kinds of weapons in the hands of criminals, terrorists, and the likes. Government should rise above that. That brings me to what I said earlier in one of your program in this station about the challenge of intelligence. The state security, for instance, should now tower over and above what is happening now, because you see what happens is in a case of in a situation where there is this level of insecurity, those who are the perpetrators of the insecurity are ahead of the intelligence.